I took the CVK off this Mad Dog when I upgraded it to a PWK. I had the CVK tuned for this Mad Dog. It's a 150, and I had it tuned for it with the exhaust baffle out and the pod filter on the back. So I went from the 103 stock jet to a 105, and then I did some air idle adjustments, you know, nothing big. I think the needle was not adjustable, so I just left it. And now I've got it on this one. It doesn't look too bad. Green hoses on there, and the little green clamp, the white powder-coated intake manifold. So yeah, it looks pretty nice. It's not cool like that PWK. I really like the looks of that. I will cover that CVK carb and tell you all about it. But to let you know what this thing is, NCY cam, Toyota 90cc kit, Polini 95mm variator, CVK 24mm carburetor. We're gonna see how this works. It was literally a 10-minute install. So simple. If you've already got that cable on there, that saves you a lot of aggravation. That's why I love a CVK. It just sits there and idles. Starts right up and it idles. That's so nice. I discovered these CVK carbs seem to work better. And honestly, I don't think it's a CVK carb because it's just a 24mm size. So with a big bore kit, now you're like a 90 or maybe an 80, you want a bigger carburetor than these 19s and 21s I had. If you look at a carb, honestly, once you get it going, it's just a hole and a main jet. That's all that's in that thing, is a hole and a main jet. Every carb is going to be the same. Once you have this slide open, you just have a low pressure inside a hole and it's pulling fuel up from the float bowl. Shouldn't be much difference in any kind of carb. CVK, PWK, it doesn't matter. At wide open throttle where we ride, it's going to be about the same. But using a CVK is a super cheap option because they're readily available as takeoffs, and I think you can just get them on Amazon. I think they're pretty cheap. There are some cons to it. One is it may have tamper-proof air fuel mixture screw, tamper-proof float bowl screws like this one had, and I had to grind them off. It may have a needle that there's no adjustment on. The needle we're looking at that's attached to the slide that goes up and down on the main jet.
This is our throttle cable. More air, less air. The idle is right here. The idle and throttle cable are the exact same shaft. This is controlling how many RPM you want the engine to run at when it's sitting there idling. This is controlling how many RPM you want it to run at while you're driving. So there's some adjustments that are more critical on a CV carb because that needle is blocking the main jet in the down position until this is raised. And this is not going to really raise until the engine's running and the demand for fuel goes up when you give it throttle. So to get your bike to idle, you're going to be working with the idle jet or the pilot jet, the slow jet. There's many names for it. You got your pilot jet. This jet controlling your bike when it's idling, and because it's a CV carb, it's also controlling it just off the throttle stop. 1/16, 1/8 throttle, somewhere in that range. It's controlling it until that main jet starts working when the needle's raised. But we can adjust it with the air idle screw. We've got a screw on the float bowl. It drains gas. That does nothing. That's not an adjustment. You may not have a screw on the float bowl. You may have one of these where it uses the cable that hangs down with the drain screw on it. Only adjustment on your carburetor, and that's your air idle adjustment screw. You may find you have this kind. It's under that plate right there. We're going to take it off. You can drill it, run a wood screw in there, pull on it with some pliers. Little cap right there. There's two brass ones, not the top one, the little one right here. There's nothing behind there but a flathead screw. And get it drilled through. We're going to take a wood screw or a sheet metal screw and stick in there. We're going to pull that out. There it is right there. So here's that adjustment screw. It's got a little spring in it to hold tension on it, just a needle, and that's going to let in more or less fuel. Now, I know I said idle adjustment's right here. That's how many RPMs we want our idle at. This is adjusting our idle. With the bike running, start with 1.5 turns out. And once it's seated, turn it 1.5 turns out, start your bike. Now it's idling, start turning the screw in. Wait for a little bit. That idle will change. It'll either increase or decrease. If it increases, that's good. Turn it in some more. So wait for another increase, and the idle's going to drop eventually. And when that idle drops, that means you've got too little fuel in there. So from there, turn it out. Keep turning it out till it decreases. You know you found that sweet spot right in there where the idle's at its best. We're looking for our highest idle on this. Idle may be way off now, so you'll have to go back over here and adjust your idle screw to set the RPM you want, because the RPM is going to change as you do this. And it's important on a CV carb because when you first crack that throttle, you're still on this. So if you're cracking the throttle and your engine's dying, this could be too lean. With the smoothbore carb, when you crack that throttle, you're pulling the slide up.
Bike idling, turn this screw in, see if it gets better or worse. So I had to come out more. See how it got worse? There it gets even worse. Let's go back in. If I Right about there is my highest idle. That's what I'm looking for. I'll give you a good throttle response. The other adjustments you can make, and this will help with your 0-30 times. This will help your initial takeoff, your acceleration, the needle position, how low it sits down in the main jet. It's lower, it's leaner. If it sits higher, it's richer. There's a little Phillips screw down inside there. Pop that out. And this one's got a little washer below it. This clip allows you to change positions of this needle jet. It makes it sit higher or lower. This is going to greatly improve your 0-30 times. On that stock CVK, your needle may not be adjustable because they have little grooves in them in this clip. But on the stock one, it'll just have that clip, one groove, one position, not adjustable. If you buy the aftermarket CVK, the one that doesn't come on your Mad Dog, it'll be adjustable. Tamper-proof float bowl. There's a workaround to that. So you can either grind those off, get new screws. I'm just cutting them down with my Dremel. Put a bald end on here. In reality, probably make more sense to just buy the aftermarket CVK 24. They're pretty cheap, and that's a lot of pain in the butt for that, these screws, and the adjustable needle. This is my stock CVK off that Mad Dog 150, and I have a bunch of these screws laying around, and I also pulled that out, and I also have needles with clips on them, spares. So I went ahead and used this one. It's like a free mod for me. The other disadvantage to a CVK, the air fuel mixture screw is important, and it needs to be tuned right for starting, because when you start a CVK, you're starting it purely off that. You can cheat a regular carburetor and twist the throttle, pull that slide up, and start it off the main jet. You can't do that with a CVK. When you twist the throttle on your CVK, you're not moving that slide at all. It doesn't do anything. You're just moving a butterfly valve over here. It's the low pressure that's raising your slide, and if the bike's not running, you're not going to create a low pressure. So you really can't start it off your main jet, and you can't get it to idle off your main jet like you can a normal carb. So that air idle screw is important. Another big disadvantage of a CVK is if your pilot or idle jet, or whatever they call that, gets dirty and gets clogged, it is not going to start. On a normal carb, you can start it off your main jet. Main jet's right there. You can open that throttle with your cable and get fuel in there and start it. If this is clogged, or if your float bowl's low, it's not going to start it. If it's clogged, obviously it's not going to start because you're not going to get any fuel into your carburetor, and all you're doing is that. You can get fuel in via the enriching jet, which I think is right here. Note the position on that also. Let's take this carburetor and look at it horizontal. That's your main jet, way down here. So the float bowl comes down to about where that red stick is and goes up, it's full of gas. As that gas gets lower and lower and lower and evaporates because it's been sitting, this main jet can still pick up fuel. If you have this situation, you can give it some throttle with a normal cable carburetor. You can open up this main jet by unseating the needle, and you can get it to start off that main jet and get some fuel pumped into here. This idle jet is way up in here, way higher. If your fuel is down here, this bike will never start. Your enriching jet is here. If it's cold enough out, it should pull fuel from your enriching jet, but if you're in Florida and it's hot, you're not going to pull fuel out of there. It's not going to turn the circuit on. And that's one of the biggest problems with the CVK that make it hard to start. Where a PWK or something will start right up because you can give it some gas and start it. Like on the old dirt bikes, you give it a little bit of throttle and start it. That was a thing. But these things here, you can give it all the gas in the world, you're not going to start it. The guys that make these CVKs understand this. If you look on your 50 CVK carb, this little lever here, right there. When you turn the throttle, it'll actually raise this little lever like that. How it moves up right there. What it's doing is it's pushing down this little plunger. So when I give it gas, pushes that down. So you can just twist the throttle before you start it a bunch of times and push that down several times. That's an accelerator pump, just like on a 70s car. That will actually spray some fuel into your intake up here. And it uses this pump down here to do it. But what's odd is, on the 150 carburetors, I don't see that lever. I don't see that pump on the side down here. Does a 150 use a different system, or do they even have an accelerator pump? I don't know. Yeah, let me know in the comments if you know. Does a 150 have an accelerator pump? Is it part of this vacuum system? No idea. The advantages to the CVK are it fits that GY6 intake manifold you see on eBay, Amazon. You can cap off that vacuum port if you don't have a vacuum pump, if you're running an electric pump. The other advantage is it's got the auto choke. That's a real handy feature. I never know when I need choke or not. But this thing here, it just turns it on when it needs it. And I think the biggest advantage is just the ease of install. It takes the same throttle cable as your 50. So your 50 throttle cable will fit right on here. Leave it hooked up to the hand throttle. Just undo the cable from your stock 50 carb. Put the cable on your 150 carb. That makes it easy. And it's pretty self-explanatory how it goes on there. Another advantage of this is they're cheap or free in my case. This is the spacer that's on the 50. 18 millimeters, so not too bad. But this is the one on the 150. It's a lot bigger, 23 millimeters. And I think the intake port on your 50 head, if you get that Nuraku, that big bore head with your big bore kit, I think it might be around 21 or 2 millimeters. So you definitely want something this big, or the Nuraku spacer, but you want to get rid of that one. This is the GY6 intake. That baby is 25 millimeters. So it's plenty big, and that can bolt right to the aluminum head. I just don't know if it'll hit anything. It may hit the engine, because I've always put it on a spacer, but it might just sit right on the head like that. There is an O-ring in there, and if you do set it right on the head, you do the O-ring right on the aluminum head. If you use a spacer, make sure you have the gasket on this side, spacer there. You want the O-ring on there. You have the spacer with the smooth side up, or like that. Then you have a gasket between this and the cylinder head, and here's that gasket going like that. And that would be your stack up on your bike: gasket, spacer, O-ring, and this. The pod filter size you want to get is 42, 43, somewhere in there.